border security.
The president is expected to announce new measures aimed at slowing the flow of illegal crossings on the southern border.
What has been a broken immigration system for a long time. Cracking down on illegal immigration, strengthening legal immigration, and protecting dreamers, those who have temporary protective status, and farm workers, who all are part of the fabric of our nation. But congressional Republicans have refused to consider my comprehensive plan. And they rejected my recent request for an additional $3.5 billion to secure the border and funds for 2,000 new asylum personnel, another asylum officers and personnel, and 100 new immigration judges, so people don't have to wait years to get their claims adjudicated, which they have a right to make a claim legally. And the failure to pass and fund this comprehensive plan has increased the challenges that we're seeing at our southwest border. No one knows this better than the Vice President. And to truly understand what's happening there, it's important to step back and see the bigger picture here. You know, I know it's hard to see, but because our politics has been so divisive, you know it's getting much better, you've all observed, but it's been so darn divisive that it clouds the picture. I mean, it clouds the picture. But let me explain what I'm going to do, and as clearly and plainly as I can. I know it's a complicated issue. I don't want to pretend there's anything easy about it. People come to America for a whole lot of different reasons, to seek new opportunity in what is the strongest economy in the world. Can't blame them wanting to do it. They flee oppression, you know, to the freest nation in the world. They chase their own American dream in the greatest nation in the world. And the story of America is the story of so many of your families, including mine, going back to the mid-1800s from Ireland. Now, there are a number of ways to immigrate to America legally under our existing laws. For example, an American citizen can sponsor an immediate family member from another country. An American company can sponsor an employee from another country. There are visas for students to study in our colleges and other special categories. And regardless of the legal pathway they process them to require everyone be involved in following the law. That's the notion. There are laws to get here legally. That includes another legal way for someone to come to America by seeking asylum because they're fleeing persecution, like a lot of our ancestors did as well. And for many people, that's what's happening at our southwest border now. Over the past several years, thousands of people have been fleeing from Central and South America and the Caribbean countries ruled by oppressive dictators, including Cuba, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and escaping gang violence, which has the same impact, in Haiti. Currently, these 4 countries account for most of the people traveling into Mexico to start a new life by getting to the American border and trying to cross. But instead of safe and orderly process at the border, we have a patchwork system that simply doesn't work as it should. We don't have enough asylum officers or personnel to determine whether people qualify for asylum. There's a standard by which you have to meet. We don't have enough immigration judges, to adjudicate the claims of immigrants. In fact, the previous administration used a rule called Title 42 to deal with the pandemic. To rapidly expel people who crossed the border. It was designed to deal with the pandemic, but it's used as a means to expel people at the border. People turned away under Title 42, and they're not barred from trying to come back. They've been turned away. They go back. They try again. They try again. Well, you know, they can and they do try to re-enter the United States again and again, which makes the problem at the border even worse. And under the United States Supreme Court decision, a case on Title 42 later this year, my administration will make a decision, finally, what to do about Title 42. In the meantime, my administration will continue to use that authority as the Supreme Court has required. And until Congress passes the funds, a comprehensive immigration plan to fix the system completely, my administration is going to work to make things better at the border using the tools that we have available to us now. Today, my administration is taking several steps to stiffen enforcement for those who try to come without a legal right to stay. and to put in place a faster process, I emphasize a faster process, to decide a claim of asylum. Someone says, I'm coming because I'm escaping oppression. Well, there's got to be a way to determine that much quicker for people who are credibly seeking protection from persecution. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas will detail these actions very shortly after I finish at Homeland Security. But here's one significant step we're taking. Over the summer, we saw a huge spike in the number of Venezuelans traveling through Mexico and attempting to enter the United States without going through our legal processes. We responded by using and ensuring that there are two safe and lawful ways for someone leaving the country to come to America. That was one of the reasons you were proposing. First, if they're seeking asylum, they can use an app on their cell phone called CBP1, O-N-E, CBP1, O-N-E. That's to spell it out, not the number one. To schedule an appointment at a port of entry and make their asylum claim there without crossing the border unlawfully and have a decision determined by an asylum officer, do they qualify? Second, in October, we worked with the Mexican government to launch a new parole program. There's another program called, you all know it, but the public may not, called the parole program, that immediately showed results by reducing the number of people crossing the border unlawfully. The way this parole program works, one must have a lawful sponsor here in the United States who agrees to sponsor you to get here. Then that person has to undergo rigorous background checks and apply from outside the United States and not cross the border illegally in the meantime. If they apply and their application is approved, they can use the same app, the CBP1 app, to present at a port of entry and be able to work in the United States legally for 2 years. That's the process. But if their application is denied, or if they attempt to cross into the United States unlawfully, they'll be returned back to Mexico and will not be eligible for this program after that. So if they making the program available, if they apply and they do it properly, fine. If they don't apply and they try to come through, they're not going to have an opportunity to deal with the program. This new process is orderly, it's safe, and it's humane, and it works. Since we created the new program, the number of Venezuelans trying to enter America without going through a legal process has dropped dramatically, from about 1,100 per day to less than 250 per day on average. That's several hundred people on average every single day who are not crossing into America illegally. Today, I'm announcing that my administration is going to expand the parole program for people not only from Venezuela, but from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti. Again, these four countries, Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti, these four countries account for most of the people now traveling into Mexico to try to start a new life by crossing the border into the United States of America on the southwest border. We anticipate this action is going to substantially reduce the number of people attempting to cross our southwest border without going through a legal process. In fact, today, I'm announcing that Mexico has agreed to allow to return up to 30,000 persons per month who try, get caught, and get sent back from those four countries, who are apprehended while attempting to unlawfully cross the border, the southwest border. My message is this: if you're trying to leave Cuba, Nicaragua, or Haiti, or have agreed to begin a journey to America, do not just show up at the border. Stay where you are and apply legally from there. Starting today, if you don't apply through the legal process, you will not be eligible for this new parole program. Let me reiterate. You need a lawful sponsor in the United States of America, number one, and you need to undergo a rigorous background check, number two. If your application is approved and you show up at a U.S. airport or when and where directed, excuse me, you have access. But if your application is denied or you attempt to cross into the United States unlawfully, you will not be allowed to enter. Look, we should all recognize that as long as America is the land of freedom and opportunity, people are going to try to come here. And that's what many of our ancestors did. And it's no surprise that it's happening again today. We can't stop people from making the journey, but we can require them to come here, that they come here in an orderly way under U.S. law. And let me say it again. The actions we're announcing today will make things better, but will not fix the border problem completely. There's more that has to be done. I laid that out in the first week I was here. That work will not be done unless and until the Congress enacts and funds a more comprehensive immigration plan that I proposed on day one. Until Congress has acted, I can act where I have legal capacity to do so. Last year, I brought together 20 leaders, many of you were there, and from the Western Hemisphere, heads of state, to stabilize the flow of immigration, to expand pathways to immigration, and to manage the border humanely. The leaders of the hemisphere built on those efforts that I led when I was vice president to expand economic assistance to nations in North Central America, so people here can improve their economic prospects at home instead of having to leave for the United States. Most people would much rather stay in the country they are if they can feed their families, be safe, send their kids to school, and have opportunity. It's not like people, you've heard me say it before, it's not like people are sitting around a table and somewhere in Central America and say, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have. Let's give it to a coyote, a smuggler. They'll take us on a harrowing journey for thousands of miles to get to the United States. Then we're going to legally cross the border. They're going to drop us in a desert, and we're faced where we don't speak the language. Won't that be fun? I'm not being facetious. Well, President Harris led this effort to make things better in the countries from which they are leaving. And thanks to her leadership, she's been able to generate more than $3.2 billion from the private sector to create jobs and opportunities in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Tell people stay in their own countries, home countries, where it'll be safer and they have some opportunities. We've also set up a joint patrols and law enforcement with Mexico and Guatemala that share real-time information on locations that smugglers are using to convince migrant groups to cross illegally. That's what they're doing. They're out recruiting. They're taking all the savings or anything they have to take them on an incredibly dangerous journey. We embedded our Border Patrol officers with Mexican patrols to detect and raid human smuggling operations. Thus far, there had more than 7,000 arrests of human smugglers in the last 6 months. 7,000. That's not just human smuggling at the border. We're focused on cracking down on drug smuggling, which is a serious and deadly problem. And I made a promise we would try this. My administration has allocated record funding that added hundreds of...
We're listening here to President Biden discussing border security in this speech, or I should say, the speech comes as the Supreme Court's deciding the fate of a pandemic-era expulsion policy known as Title 42.
That's right. The president has announced new steps designed to ease the number of illegal crossings. We heard him saying specifically to people coming from Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti that they should apply in their home countries by having a lawful sponsor here in the U.S. And undergoing rigorous background checks. Without that, he said, quote, you will not be allowed to enter.
He also announced a new app that those seeking asylum can use. For more on everything that's just been announced, let's bring in CBS News immigration reporter Camila Montoya Galvez. Camila, great to see you. You've been listening to the president's announcement with us. What stood out to you, and what are the key points from the president's speech?
Good afternoon, Errol and Lana. That's right. We just heard President Biden announce a new series of measures that his administration is taking along the U.S.-Mexico border to try to reduce the unprecedented levels of migration that have been recorded there over the past 2 years. There are really two main components to this carrots and sticks, if you will, strategy that the president has unveiled just now. The main component includes an expansion of the Title 42 pandemic restrictions, and this will allow the U.S. to rapidly expel migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti who cross into the U.S. illegally. That is a significant change in policy because throughout the pandemic, Mexico has generally only accepted the return of migrants from Mexico and migrants from Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador into its territory. So it is expanding the nationalities that are now subject to expulsion under Title 42 if they enter the U.S. without legal permission. At the same time, the Biden administration is expanding legal opportunities for migrants to enter the U.S. from these countries. If migrants from Cuba, Nicaragua, and Haiti have financial sponsors here in the U.S., they may be eligible to come here under the Temporary Parole Authority, which will allow them to work and live here legally on a temporary basis. The administration has announced that it will use about 30,000 spots per month under this program to allow eligible individuals to enter the U.S. under this process. And this is really modeled after a policy, Arrow and Lana, that the Biden administration implemented last year to process record levels of migrants from Venezuela. You know, this policy led to a dramatic drop in Venezuelan arrivals along the U.S.-Mexico border. Officials now hope that this will have a similar impact on migration flows from Nicaragua, Cuba, and Haiti, but only time will tell.
So I want to ask you something that I think people will be scratching their heads about a little bit when we're talking about this carrot and stick approach. The Biden administration, President Biden himself just announced that he's expanding the expulsions under Title 42. Just a little bit ago, we heard the Biden administration making an argument before the Supreme Court that they wanted to be able to repeal Title 42. This in many ways, philosophically, is a shift from what the Biden administration had said. How do they reconcile that?
That's right, Lana. This is the latest twist in a complicated and convoluted history surrounding the Title 42 pandemic restriction. This is a public health law dating back to the late 19th century that was first invoked by the Trump administration at the outset of the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. The Biden administration for over a year continued this policy and defended it, saying it was necessary to stop the spread of COVID-19. In April, the CDC tried to stop this policy, saying that pandemic conditions had improved, but then a group of Republican-led states convinced a federal judge in Louisiana to block the policy's termination on technical grounds. Then we saw another federal court in November declare that Title 42 was unlawful and gave the Biden administration 5 weeks to end it. But then we had another ruling from the Supreme Court that has stayed that order from the lower court, and that has now kept Title 42 in place indefinitely, at least until the justices decide whether a group of Republican-led states should be allowed to defend this policy in court. So because of this, the Biden administration will continue to rely on this policy to manage migration flows. It is in many ways inconsistent with their prior efforts to try to terminate this policy, but President Biden acknowledged today, Lana, that he doesn't have a lot of tools in his toolbox to deal with this historic numbers of migration, and he urged Congress to reform the U.S. immigration system, which has not been updated, importantly, since the 1990s.
Yeah, he really called out congressional Republicans for not taking up his comprehensive immigration plan, which he said would hire additional personnel, including asylum judges and processing agents.
And he acknowledged
and
this
like
is a stopgap. He says, I'm doing what I can with the tools I have until and unless Congress gets its act together.
All right, Camilo, thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of Congress getting its act together, have you
Nice
heard?
segue.
Have you heard? We actually want to get you to Washington now. The lower chamber still deadlocked over who will become the next Speaker of the House.
That's right. 2 days of voting already, 6 ballots, hours of frustration. But Republicans today appear to have actually made little ground in terms of breaking